There's so many different things that we're trying to deal with on how to do that. Like, and then the lending side. It's
It's super tough. All right, so should we start?
Sure.
So by the way, this is the first day that I'm officially freaked out by the coronavirus.
Well, it's because it's a pandemic now.
I think that's what
It just got.
I'm driving over here and I'm hearing a report that says there's projections that says that 20 to 70% of America is going to get the coronavirus. Like, I think that's probably BS too, but today I'm kind of freaked out.
I don't know though, because they're like Italy, they shut down Italy.
Yeah, I know.
They're shutting, and I'll check because I have an agent, and we were talking yesterday. NBA, like they're having major issues right now because they don't want to play. The players won't play to a closed, like no people.
Right, that's what LeBron said.
I think, yes.
Right.
And then hockey, and then they've shut down like the music fest in Miami.
Well, you know, the state of Washington yesterday said.
And the Kentucky Derby's going to lose $300 million. I just canceled my trip.
Oh, were you going to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, the state of Washington won't allow any gatherings of more than 250 people.
Right.
Oh, how is President Trump going to do his rallies?
I don't know. I definitely don't want to talk politics, but
he doesn't need to. He's going to win.
I know.
It is getting scary.
Today was scary.
But you guys have to freaking stop, because the bottom line is more people die of the flu every freaking year.
Death toll in America. Coronavirus 14. Abortion 63 million.
I know. I'm sorry I brought it up.
No, it's old people and anyone who has illnesses.
They're compromised immune system.
No, I know.
But then why is the government too? Like they just passed, insurance companies are now having to protect people. Like they've increased their policies to cover the coronavirus and costs of the coronavirus.
Oh, that's
like they're doing it themselves. They just passed that through Senate yesterday.
Crap.
Yeah.
Your own government's doing it. Like it's.
Yeah, I know.
It is.
It's such BS.
All right, let's talk appraising. I'm sorry. It's coronavirus. Everything turns into a political conversation. It's weird. It's the
We've been talking about toilet paper.
all right, so super quick. We have this scheduled till 3 o'clock. I kind of go until I'm done talking and you guys have no more questions. So sometimes it's 2:30, sometimes it's 3:30. I'm here for you. And the reality is, and I mean this sincerely, I want to help you get better at your job. And I think that if you start taking a more active role in appraisals, you'll do a better job for your client. And my measure of what makes an agent better isn't necessarily do they make more money. I understand that matters. But to me, the best agents are the ones that put their arms around their clients and just guide them through the process every step of the way. And at the end of it, everyone feels good. Okay? A little bit about me. I've been appraising about 30 years, and I bring a unique perspective to an environment like this because not only am I a field appraiser, I've got 5 appraisals today in the rain. But I also helped found an appraisal management company that's a nationwide appraisal management company. Now I think top 10 in the United States, and I think yesterday we set a record and got 750 appraisal orders, which I can't believe I'm part of a company that got 750 appraisal orders in one day. My point of telling you that is I see a lot of appraisals, and I think I bring a good perspective to a class like this. Also, I failed miserably as a real estate agent, so I have a unique appreciation about how difficult your job is, and so I want to be there to, like I said, to help make sure you don't fail like I failed. Let's start with a little story because I think it kind of leads into a bunch of topics here. Who's heard of an area called the Coronado Historic Area? Okay, so Coronado, for those of you who don't know, is Central Phoenix. It goes from 7th Street to 16th Street, McDowell to Thomas. Can you all picture that neighborhood?
Yep.
So I know that neighborhood really well. I own an investment house in there, and it happens to be a mile away from where my office is. So, and I've done probably 100 appraisals in there. And so I had a unique circumstance. I was asked by the bank to do an appraisal for a refinance 3 months after somebody bought the house. And that's unique. You're not normally refinancing that soon after. And for me, it was kind of a cheat because I saw what they paid for it 3 months ago, and on refinances, sometimes you have no idea what anyone thinks their house is worth. So I had a cheat, and I saw that they had paid $335,000 for this house. Remember that number. And I'm running my comps, and I know the area very well, and I'm sticking within those boundaries that I gave you. And that's a high density area. There's a ton of turnover. Okay, so you really never have to leave Coronado when you're appraising in there, unless you have an incredibly unique house. So I'm running my comps, and I got like 40 of them with similar square footage, and they had sales prices from $225,000 to $295,000, with one sale at $335,000. Can you guys see what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exaggerating any part of this story. The subject at $335,000 was $40,000 higher than the next house in those boundaries, similarly sized. So I'm kind of nervous because I hate it when people are mad at me, and is pretty sure someone's going to be mad at me at the end of this one. Probably picked the wrong profession now that I think about it. So I'm at the inspection, I'm talking, I'm asking all my normal questions, I'm doing all my normal due diligence, and I asked a question I don't normally ask. I said, hey, I know you just bought this 3 months ago. Did you get a copy of the appraisal, and do you mind sending it to me? Because in my head, I know that I now am going to be compared against something. I'd like to see what that something is. He sent me a copy of the appraisal, and it took me about a minute to figure out what happened. And so if you're taking notes, here's where the notes start. The appraisal had 3 closed sales and 1 listing on it in the sales grid. To me, you should never see an appraisal with less than that. Generally speaking, I think an appraiser that's doing 3 closed sales and a listing is not doing a very thorough job. It's really hard for me to meet all my standards and obligations with so little data. My average appraisal has like 8 comps. So when I see a 3 closed sales, 1 listing appraisal, I automatically worry that I've got an appraisal that's cutting corners, that's not thorough. Okay, so keep that in mind when you see appraisals. The other thing, the appraiser was licensed, not certified, and I know that because their license number started with a 1. Okay, most appraisers are certified, residential or certified general, so their license will start with a 2 or a 3. So that's another thing I would start doing, is looking at your appraisal, look at the signature page, and let's see what their level of licensing is. About 80% of appraisers in this town are certified, and so if a lender is using a licensed appraiser, there's a good chance they're looking for the cheapest appraiser, not the best appraiser. If I were in your shoes and I had a transaction in escrow, I would only want to work with a certified appraiser.
So tell me that one more time. It starts with a 2?
So certified, there's 2 levels of certification. Okay. Their license will start with a 2 or a 3. Okay. If the license starts with a 1, then they're licensed, not certified. Okay? So I have 2 red flags. Another red flag as I'm reviewing this appraisal is the appraiser got paid $275. Anytime there's an appraisal management company involved, meaning they outsource it to a third-party appraisal management company, the appraiser has to disclose what their compensation is. What I've found over time is there's a direct correlation between the amount of money the appraiser is making and how hard they work. Okay? You shouldn't be doing business with any lender that uses an appraisal management company where the appraiser is not making at minimum $350. So when I see a licensed appraiser getting paid $275 using 3 closed sales and a listing, all the red flags are there that I probably don't have a great piece of work that I'm staring at. So, comp 4 was the listing, and it was a good listing. It was in the Coronado area. It's still listed 3 months later when I'm doing the appraisal. Why do you think? Because it's overpriced. And I don't blame the appraiser for that, because I had the benefit of 90 more days to watch what's happened and watch the market reject the price. So I'm not going to fault the appraiser for that. But comps 1 through 3, none of them are in this Coronado area. I had 50 comps to choose from. The appraiser considered none of those. The appraiser, all 3 of his closed sales, he selected from a place called the Willow Historic Area. Anyone ever hear of that?
Yes.
So Willow is Thomas to McDowell, like Coronado. Central is 7th Avenue. The important thing about this that you have to understand is Willow sells for 15% more than Coronado. Do you see what happened? No. The appraised value miraculously came in at the contract price of $335,000, based on 3 closed sales from a positively superior neighborhood and 1 overpriced listing. Now I understand. Now I'm doing my appraisal. It's not changing my value, but now at the end of it, I'm going to reconcile what I appraised it at versus what the other appraiser appraised it at. So I appraised it at $295,000, which was the highest sale out of my comp set. Finished the appraisal, wrote a long addendum on why I wouldn't go to Willow. I used 8 comps. All 8 of them were in Coronado. Why I wouldn't go to Willow. Why I think that, they overpaid for it the first time. And then I sent it off to the lender and I just waited by the phone. I knew somebody was going to call me. I didn't know if it was going to be the lender, the appraisal management company, or the homeowner. It was the homeowner. And he was super mad at me. And I learned a lot about the call. And I feel like this is where the learning moments come in. First of all, I said, hey, you got a copy of the appraisal, right? Yes, he had one. I won't talk to him unless the lender's given him a copy because I have a fiduciary obligation to the lender. But if the lender shares my appraisal, I feel like I can talk about it with them. And I said, hey, did you read my appraisal before you called me? Because we'll have a more educated conversation if you heard my position before you start yelling at me. And he said he read it. What I learned in that conversation first was, to some people, reading the appraisal is turning to page 2, looking at the bottom and seeing what the value is. I don't want you to ever call that reading an appraisal. That's seeing what it appraised for. That's not reading the appraisal. Okay? So we talked, and I learned a lot from the call. Because I'm trying to understand how we got to this point. I know why the appraisal was bad, but I said, do you know if your agent ever met the appraiser? No, I don't think so. Do you know if the appraiser ever gave comps to the appraiser? No, I don't think so. Do you recall if your agent ever asked to see a copy of the appraisal after you got it? No, he didn't. Here's a question. Before you made the offer on this property, did your agent run comps? And he originally said yes. And then what I realized after we talked a little further was the agent ran listings but never ran a closed sales for this person. Okay? So, and I forgot to tell you something, a really sad part about this story. First-time home buyer. First-time home buyer is hearing today that his house is worth $40,000 less than he paid for it. So the conversation actually ended okay. But I'm positive about one thing. He's going to sue his appraiser, or the appraiser. And he should. It's a terrible appraisal, fraudulent or geographical incompetency, and he'll win. The E&O insurance company will settle with that claim all day long. But I also think he's going to sue his agent. And while I don't encourage it, and I think that's a little more of a gray area, I want you to see it from his perspective and understand that I don't think that agent put his arms around that homeowner, the first-time buyer, and walked him all the way through the transaction. So I think there's some learning moments here, and I want to make you better at your job, and I don't want you to be in that position. First, can we agree, because my talking to agents all the time, it seems like it's the anomaly to not run comps and run closed sales for your buyer, right? You guys are doing that, aren't you? You're running closed sales along with listings before you guide your person into making an offer. Great. Okay, so I don't want that to happen to you. But I think there's some steps that you can take to try and make yourself involved in the appraisal process. And the more involved you are, the more control you have, the more input you have, and the more protection you're giving your homeowner. Okay? It starts, I think, with interviewing appraisers when they call you. If it's your listing, you know, especially if you take the key out of the lockbox, that they have to call you, right? At some point, you're the gatekeeper and no one's getting into that house without you. What you don't know is how that appraiser was assigned to your deal, right? You don't know. Sometimes it's, like at Apex, that's our appraisal management company. We care a great deal about who the appraiser is, and I think that's the hardest part of my job, is finding the right appraiser. And if I find the right appraiser, everything else about my job is easy. If I've got the right person on the job, then I don't have to worry about a bunch of other things. But the big issue is sometimes that appraiser who's calling you is not geographically competent. If you're taking notes, write that down. It's a really important term. As the owner of an appraisal management company, I have a federal obligation to give you a geographically competent appraiser. What does that mean? Somebody. What do you think that is?
Someone that's familiar with the area.
Yeah. The number one reason I see an appraisal where the value is in error is because the appraiser didn't understand the market they were appraising. It happens all the time. They think it's okay to cross this street or to cross this canal or to go on the other side of the park, when sometimes markets change dramatically, almost street by street. Okay? So sometimes that appraiser is calling you is geographically competent. Like I said, we care a lot about that. We find where they live versus where the appraisal is, and then we can cross-reference against how they've done in the past in that area. So we care a lot about it. But most appraisal management companies don't. And so sometimes that appraiser who's calling you is just whoever's up next in the rotation. And if you worked hard to get a house in Paradise Valley in escrow, and the next one up in the rotation is from Queen Creek, guess who's making a field trip to Paradise Valley? That stinks. Because that appraiser probably doesn't know Paradise Valley. True story, sometimes the person who's calling you is the cheapest. Because lender or appraisal management companies know, hey, I'm going to get $475 for this appraisal. My good appraisers, I have to pay $375. But I've got some not as good appraisers that I can pay $275, which means I've basically doubled my profit margin. Okay? So sometimes that appraiser who's calling you is legitimately the cheapest option. That stinks for you. You don't want that in your transaction. Sometimes it's whoever's the fastest. Most transactions don't need the fastest appraiser. You're better off, if it takes an extra day or two to get the right appraiser, you're better off with that. So I think you should start interviewing these appraisers when they call you. Appraisers won't like that very much, so I think actually I have a favor to ask of you. If you're going to do this, I ask that you keep your level of professionalism up here no matter what, okay? Because sometimes appraisers will get a little salty with you, and I'll explain later why. You always keep your level of professionalism and kindness way up here. It'll serve you better in the end. So I think you prepare ahead of time for the call, and I think a good way to start it is, hey, thanks for calling. Your name's not familiar to me. I don't think we've ever worked together before. I hope you don't mind. I have a couple questions because I just want to make sure that you understand this community, and all I'm trying to do is protect my client. Okay? That's a really reasonable thing. I just want to make sure that my client, the seller, is getting an appraiser who understands my neighborhood. So I have a couple questions. My favorite question to ask an appraiser is, can you please give me an idea what geographical boundaries you're going to use to look for comps? Okay? That's the main concern when you're talking about, does the appraiser know my neighborhood? Are they going to the right place for comps that are similar to my house? Okay? I don't like questions that are easy to lie your way through. How many appraisals have you done in my neighborhood? You don't know if the appraiser is telling you the truth. You really want to get a feel for, do they know the neighborhood? And if I know your neighborhood, I can say, yeah, Greenway to Bell, 64th Street to 56th Street. If I know the neighborhood, I can do that right off the top of my head. There's some other things that I would ask, but you can ask like school districts or whatever, but I think that first question is going to get a dialogue started where you're going to get some insight as to if they're professional and if they understand your neighborhood. Okay? Other questions that I would ask.
Are you certified and licensed?
That's the next thing. I would say, are you certified? And there's a few reasons to do that. One, I wouldn't work with a licensed appraiser. I wouldn't work with the bottom 20% of my industry. Well, I'm not bringing up an incredibly unreasonable request here, right? I'm not saying I want to work with the elite top 10%. You're saying I just don't want to work with the crappy bottom 20%, okay? There's another reason to ask that, are you certified question, because sometimes, let's go through this. Certified general starts with a 3. That's mostly a commercial designation. Certified residential starts with a 2. That's what most appraisers are. Then there's licensed, which isn't very good, but it's the 2 things below that that I want you to even be more worried about. The level below that is trainee. And what happens is an appraiser, if you want to become an appraiser, you have to go to class and get 150 hours of school, okay? And then you get a trainee license. And then you go and find a certified appraiser to park your license under, okay? And the way it used to be is that certified mentor had to go with you on the inspections, had to go and make the observations of the house, measure the house, take pictures of the comps, observe the neighborhood. So really the apprentice wasn't helping out that much. But nobody wanted an apprentice because you had to do all that work yourself. They're not really helping you that much. So now trainees are allowed to go without their mentors with them. And that's really bad. What that means is somebody who's been in this business for 1 month, who can't tell the difference between travertine and tile, quartz and marble, granite and synthetic, might be the one that's the eyes and ears on the appraisal. You don't want that. I wouldn't let a trainee in. And if somebody said, no, I'm a trainee, I'd say, have your mentor call me. Okay? And I want that mentor to be there. So that's another reason to ask that question. Don't let your transaction be at risk because a trainee who doesn't know your neighborhood is the one doing it. But then there's now a level below that you should be concerned with. There's this new thing that started within the last 6 months called bifurcated appraisals. Has anyone ever heard of that? Bifurcated. B-I-F-R-U-K-R-C-A-T-E-D. Bifurcated, I think is what it is. And what that means is where an appraisal typically is completed by one person who does the inspection, who measures the house, who takes pictures of the comps, who writes the report, who signs it. Bifurcated appraisals is the lending industry's way to get appraisals faster and cheaper. But it's a terrible idea because what they're saying is somebody else who's unaffiliated with the appraiser can now do the inspection and send pictures to the appraiser who never leaves his office. Okay? Legitimately, that person who's calling you, if you don't ask, might be an Uber driver. True story. One of the largest appraisal management companies is all in on these bifurcated appraisals, and they're paying Uber drivers $50 to go shoot the pictures and send them to the appraiser. Your transaction is at risk if the appraiser's not doing their own inspection because you could miss something. But here's, like, to turn it back on you, how many buyers have you worked with in your careers that are not investors, that are buying for primary residents who say, yeah, I don't need to see the house. I'll just take it. Right? You want to see it because you gain critical insight from being at the house. You have the house measured, you take pictures, you drive the neighborhood. All that stuff isn't happening if the appraiser's not out there meeting you. Okay? Yeah.
Can you disallow an appraiser?
Yeah,
Can you say,
I think
no,
so.
I'm not giving you the key to the house?
So let's talk about that, because
Okay.
that's what happens next.
Okay.
So if you're happy with the way the conversation's going, and maybe they don't answer the questions exactly the way you'd like them to, but they seem professional and knowledgeable and willing to talk with you and tell you what their process is and you're okay with that, set the appointment and meet them out there, and then we'll talk about that next. If you're not happy, my reminder, keep your level of professionalism way up here, no matter what they say to you. Just say, hey, let me call you back. I need to check my schedule. I need to check with my sellers. Give me your number. I'll call you back. Then you need to get to the decision maker in the appraiser selection process. Every transaction, the lender should either have an appraisal desk or they will outsource their entire process to an appraisal management company. Your key is to get a hold of the loan officer, because you should be aren't you getting loan approval letters regularly, so you should know who the loan officer is. I would call them and say, hey, I just had a really bad experience with the appraiser, and I need to talk to either your appraisal desk or can you give me the number to your appraisal management company, okay? And you want to call them and you want to use that term, a lack of geographical competency, because that appraisal management company has a federal obligation to give you a geographically competent appraiser. And if you call them up and say, I don't think this appraiser is geographically competent, here's why. I don't think the appraiser is professional, here's why. The good professional lenders and appraisal management companies will give you a new appraiser. I would. If you call me up, if Apex didn't do a great job on assigning the appraiser, and you called me up, that happens every so often, we'll call the appraiser and say, we got to pull you off this job. Yeah.
So, if they are not certified but licensed, what would you say? I don't think that. Yeah.
I would, so again, non-confrontational.
Right.
I'm never letting you in, you licensed appraiser. Non-confrontational.
Well, I mean,
let me call you back. I would call the lender and say, I want a certified appraiser.
And just like that.
Yeah, I would just say, look, this transaction is really important. This maybe is a complex appraisal, or I need to protect my client, or J. Joseph said this. I don't care. I get blamed all the time for things. I think that I'm entitled to a certified appraiser. And no guarantees, but I think most of the time it works. Big banks don't care about you. So sometimes if you're using Wells Fargo or B of A or Chase, they might not do anything. But I think most people do care, and you're an important member of the transaction, so I would give you a new appraiser. I highly recommend you do this over the phone, because once the appraiser's met you out at the property, he might be entitled to some sort of compensation. He's put time into it. They are less likely to walk away from a job. And the other thing is, generally speaking, if you complain to Chase and Chase says, I'm not going to give you a new appraiser, your appraiser should never know that you complained. I don't think they'll know. And that's why you keep this level of, you keep your level of professionalism way up here, because if in fact you're working with a lame lender who won't give you a new appraiser, no harm done. Okay? So that's how I do it. If you represent the buyer, I think you should care just as much about who the appraiser is. I would try and make myself involved. It's a little harder because the natural pathway is through the listing agent. But what I would do if I was representing the buyer is I would say, hey, buyer, when you're taking application with your lender, I need you to tell them to list me as the contact person for the appraisal. Every appraisal order form, there's a box that says, who should we call for access? Some appraisers just automatically call the listing agent, but most of them look at that box. And I would do that. The other thing I would do is I would call the listing agent and say, if you get a call from the appraiser, if you're not going to be there to meet him, can you just send it to me so I can meet him? Or if you are going to meet him, can you at least tell me when the appointment is so I can be there too? Again, to me, you have one chance to be impactful, and that is before the appraisal's done. I don't spend much time talking about appealing appraisals because it usually doesn't work. So these are all things you do ahead of time, and I would not like to lose the opportunity to meet the appraiser, to give them comps, to give them a package. Okay? Any questions on any of that?
What kind of package do you give them?
Next topic. I'm just going to bring you everywhere I speak because you remind me to go on to the next thing.
That's beautiful.
So,
I do want to say,
Yeah.
we have that a lot up in Prescott because we don't have, the pool is different. So we do get a lot of appraisers that come in from out of
Phoenix
town.
or Flagstaff
A
or
lot.
something, or
So we
Sedona.
had to get
Yeah.
really good. We took a lot of classes, CE classes on it, and part of the biggest thing is we have to have our seller's permission to interview an appraiser. So for us to not give access, we have to have written permission to do that.
Really? I've never
Yeah.
heard that before.
That was from Holly Mayberry, who actually helped write the real estate.
Oh, that's
contract.
interesting. Okay.
So I've taken a lot, and so because we have it a lot, like up there. So one of the things was if we have written permission from the seller, because that gives us authorization to
act on
ask
their
these
behalf.
questions,
Okay.
and then not authorize someone to enter the home.
Super
Because
interesting.
we're doing it on behalf of the seller, because we represent the seller, right? So we're looking at, like you said,
Yeah.
so like we were talking about earlier, the value proposition when you're going to a listing, you add that I interview all my appraisers to make sure that they meet, like they're saying, the geographical
That's
location.
a great idea.
So that's how we realized, and it works well because they're like, my seller, wants somebody who's licensed, certified and
that's-
not licensed, and you're blaming the seller because really it's the seller's fault.
It's a really good idea. And talk about value add. I love that. The other value add, in case we run out of time or I forget, is if you're representing the sellers, I would say, hey, or if you're representing the buyers, I would always say, hey, when you get a copy of that appraisal, I need you to send it to me right away. Because one of the things I want to do is either with you or for you, I want to review that appraisal and make sure I feel that it's accurate. Value add, protecting your clients from start to finish, that's super consistent. And the feedback I get is buyers love that. Like, you are really looking out for them, and they feel that, and they want to use you again, and they want to refer you to other people. So that's good advice on the seller side, and then the buyer side, review those appraisals. Okay, so let's talk about what I think you should bring with you to every appraisal. Starts with a purchase contract, okay? What you should know is that if it's for a lender and it's a purchase, the appraiser is going to get a copy of that purchase contract from the lender. Here's the problem. Every so often, the lender doesn't give them every page of all the counteroffers or all the addendum. And so I hate admitting this, and I am not like this at all, but there's a lot of appraisers out there that just think their job is to hit a contract price, get their value to the contract price, and that's it. I hate that about my industry. It makes us less reliable, less credible, less professional. I wish it wasn't like that, but that happens, okay? You just have to accept that it happens. And so what I don't want to happen to any of you is the original offer was $300,000. Appraiser got the contract at $300,000. Didn't notice the box on the last page that said counteroffer attached. Didn't get the counteroffer at $305,000. So the appraiser thinks it's $300,000. At the end of it, he's like, boy, it's probably worth somewhere between $290,000 and $310,000. Oh, it's under contract at $300,000, so I'm going to come in at $300,000. The underwriter sees it, and then we know that, hey, you got the sales price wrong. It should be $305,000. But guess what? They won't change sometimes. They won't change the value. I've seen deals fall apart because the appraiser didn't have the final counteroffer, knew the underwriter saw his signed name at a lower value and wasn't willing to revisit it and change his value, even though if he would have had that $305,000 addendum at the beginning, he would have appraised it at $305,000. So I think copy the contract, final counteroffer on top, highlight the purchase price. Like, I literally had one that I finished yesterday that I look, because again, I've been doing this a long time, and there were no counteroffers in my file, but the box with the counteroffer was checked. And so I called the lender and said, hey, I need a copy of the counteroffer. But most appraisers will miss that. And so you're going to make sure they don't miss that. Okay? So that's the first thing I would put in every package. Second thing, let's talk multiple offers for a second. Okay? Especially in a market like this, on these lower price points, we're seeing a lot of deals with multiple offers. I want to tell you how I look at that as an appraiser. If at the end of the day, I think this house is worth somewhere between $300,000 and $310,000, multiple offers is not going to get me to $350,000. We have to understand that, okay? But what multiple offers does for me is it's a compelling reason to go to the absolute top of my comfort level, okay? But if I'm going to do that, it kind of means I'm sticking my neck on the line for you. I want to see the offers. It's more of because I think I kind of alluded to sometimes appraisers lie. You guys do too sometimes. And
What?
yes, it happens. And I'll ask, they'll say, hey, there were multiple offers submitted. And I'll say, can I get copies of them? And they're like, oh, well, they were verbal. I'm like, well, then you didn't really get multiple offers, did you? I don't need every page of the multiple of the offers. But I'd like page 1, 2, 3, and the signature page. Here's why. 1 has the purchase price, 2 has the personal property, 3 has seller concessions, and the signature page so I know that it actually was a real person who submitted the offer. Okay? If you had a lot of offers, if you were on the market 2 days and you had 18 showings and 4 offers, I would put copies of those offers and maybe do a little cover letter. if you don't mind. It says, hey, here's the scenario here. We had multiple offers. One of the offers was even higher than this one. But, you know, it was VA and we didn't want to deal with a VA appraisal or whatever. It's not going to get me above my comfort level, but it'll get me to the top. And then what I do, if you read my appraisals, is I'll say, here's my value. Appraiser acknowledges that the valuation is towards the high end of the range. What's important to note is that the appraiser also considered the fact that the home was on the market on only 2 days, had 17 showings and 4 offers, and I saw all 4 of those offers. Okay? That helps me. Consider giving copies. Some people have said, hey, you know, there's confidentiality here. If you need to block out a name, I don't really care. I don't think you have to, but if you want to white out a name or whatever, that's up to you. I just want to know that the offers were actually there. Yeah?
And then would you prefer that those were on paper at the home or just in?
I want to. Email's fine, but I'd like to get you in the habit of going to the appraisal. And if you're going to go and meet the appraiser, because you're more impactful. If you send me an email with all those 4 offers, you know you sent it to me, but you really know if I opened it. Information delivered is not the same as information received and reviewed. So I'm a big believer in meeting the appraiser. You're more impactful. And saying, here's the package, and then opening it up and saying, hey, there's a few things I want to highlight in here for you. That's more effective than just saying, here's the package. And then you don't know, the appraiser might stick it in his file and he might never open it again. Okay, so we got the first 2 things. The next 2 are documents that I would like you to create. One is a features list. Give me a list of upgrades that maybe make this house better than most. If you've got vinyl floors, mini blinds, Formica counters, you could probably skip this step. I can figure out what you do upgrades. But otherwise, that's helpful to me. I'm going to do my own inspection. Most of these things I should observe myself. But maybe I'm not looking in the attic to see the extra insulation. Or I'm not going on the roof and seeing the 16 SEER AC. You're going to help me tell my story. That's what I'm doing. I'm telling a story to somebody who knows nothing about my house, knows nothing about my neighborhood, and most of the time, if you give me an upgrade list, I'll put it in my appraisal.
Yeah, but
Okay. Huh?
I hate to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
But we would all love to have you on our appraisals every time. The issue here is that when we go out there, they don't really want to talk to us, because then what we're trying to do is we're trying to get them to give us the right appraisal, where now we're telling them they're not doing their job. You know what I mean? And I'm just being realistic with
he's
it.
giving you the
So
real world.
We do it, and I'll tell you, you're going to have the luck of the draw. You're going to get ones that are not going to
They're not going to listen
be
to you,
open-minded. But the
period.
thing is, it's the luck of the draw. And,
Yeah.
and as long as you're being consistent with what you're doing, and it's how you approach it.
You can only do what you can do.
Right.
And you're right.
There's nothing you can do.
She's right. Like, you're not. You remind me of something else. There's one other question that I would ask. I'm sorry, my head's coronavirus. One other question that I would ask the appraiser every time, or I would tell them, I'd say, I'd like to meet you out at the property and spend 5 minutes with you and talk about comps and features of the house. I hope that's okay. So to me, if they yell at you and say no, I would give you, if you called me up and said, Jay, Apex is doing this appraisal, I told him I want to meet him there and spend 5 minutes going over comps, and he said, go pound sand, he's not letting me in. I find that unprofessional, because he's depriving you of the opportunity to do the best job for your client. I'll pull an appraiser off a job.
But
I would do that.
And I'm with you on that. But they're taking, most of the time they're taking it as you're trying to what's the word?
Influence,
Influence
pressure.
the appraisal.
I get it.
And
Totally.
we're not, because our best
We're just
interest
doing our best
is
for our client.
Correct. So the way that
period.
we've approached that is that this is how our sellers came up with, because the sellers are the ones who pick the price, right?
Right, but you're a different market.
No, appraisal is appraisal. I've been a lender forever as well, and it's like either side, it's the same. It doesn't matter, because an appraiser's mentality is an appraiser's mentality. It
I
doesn't matter
understand
which
that,
market
but
you're in.
you have a market up there where you have this contract with the seller. We don't have that down here.
What do you mean contract with the seller?
Well, you said because these guys are coming from out of the area, we have this agreement with the seller that it has to be a certified,
Well, no, I'm saying is the questions that he's saying to ask, we talk to our seller about that when we do a listing presentation. We say we're going to ask these questions,
Okay.
and
I
the
think that's a
seller.
great idea.
And this is, so the person that I'm doing the CE does real estate down here, she
Right.
actually helped write the Arizona real estate contract.
okay.
So she's the one who recommended and it works, it doesn't always work.
Right.
But
Right.
it's not that we're in a different market, it's just appraisers are appraisers, so it's like if you follow and you come up with a process, it's just easier for them to swallow when you say, hey, my seller would like me to meet you there, and this is how they came up with the value, and these are the features that we use compared to what you might see, and these are the comps that we use.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because we don't know what comps they're gonna pull, we wanna know what geographical area they're gonna be in.
Yeah.
But this is how we came up with, how they came up with what they came up with.
And
We're not coming at them as, you need to look at this because this is right and you're wrong.
Yeah, so a couple
And it's
things
just-
addressing
it
your concerns. So first of all, do we know who my home group's approved lenders are or preferred lenders? One of them is Lizzie, right, at Cross Country. She uses Apex. She uses my company. And then I saw VIP on the refrigerators. VIP one of them?
Yes.
VIP uses Apex, my company.
Good.
You can ask. I mean, VIP has a few choices, but they have an appraisal desk. Her name's Natalie. She's smart and good at her job. And if you said, I'd like to use Apex, I think that would work. Or if you called up Natalie and said, I don't want to use this appraiser for this reason, this reason, this reason, I think she'd give you a new appraiser. So I know you all have different lenders that you use, but if you use their preferred lenders, I feel pretty good that I could get involved and help you with the process. So I think you're in a little better shape than others. And I know you're going to run into situations where appraisers are not going to be professional. They don't want to give you the time. That's why I think you interview them over the phone. You set the expectation, and you make sure they're geographically competent. And then if you don't like the way it goes, you try and get a new appraiser. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll get somebody to say, I'm not going to give you a new appraiser. But that's what I would do. And know that you're not going to get 100% success.
It's all good.
Make
I
sense?
think we just have to look at it as we're just doing the best we can. That's all
Right.
we can do. Because you are going to get appraisers that are good. It just is what it
Yeah,
is.
absolutely.
Not saying you.
So you
like
can
it.
ask the mortgage company or the lender, do you use Apex?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Lizzie hasn't been across country very long, so I don't know if they have other choices besides Apex. But last I heard, Lizzie said she's sending all her stuff to our company, which
Are you
I was pretty happy about
Apex?
that. Yeah, we're Apex.
Okay.
Yeah, we are. That was just bought by a company called Option, but that's another story. But as far as everybody knows, we're still Apex. Okay, so upgrade list. The next thing that I would do is I would put a chronological list of updates. Sounds similar, but it's really different. I really like you to keep them as two separate documents. That helps me tell the story about condition, okay? The format I like the best, the year, the list of upgrades that were made during that year, and the cost if you have them. I know we're at the mercy of the sellers, and some sellers keep great records and some sellers keep terrible records, but if you've got a seller that's got good records, in 2019 they replaced the air conditioning for $6,500. They recoated their phone roof for $2,500. That's helpful to me. Really is. Again, it's okay. Pay particular attention on this document to kitchen and bathroom features, and here's why. You don't see this, and you wouldn't know this, but when I'm filling out my appraisal form, I hit a certain section where a bubble pops up and it says, has the kitchen been updated or remodeled? And if so, what time frame? Okay? Under 1 year, 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15 years, or time frame unknown. So any kitchen related updates and the year they were done helps me answer that form. So I like to know that. So it'll do kitchen and bathroom, updated or remodeled, time frame. So, and people have asked me, how far back do you go? If your seller gives you 20 years of records, you can go back 20 years. If the seller gives you 5 years of records, go back 5 years. It really, more information is better than less. And so whatever the seller can put together for you, I would put that in a document. And so like I include the upgrade list that somebody gives me, I would also include that chronological list of updates. And it helps me if I'm making condition adjustments. If I'm saying the subject is in C3 condition, which is another story, good condition, and comp 1 is in C4 condition, and I want to make a condition adjustment, that document helps me explain to the underwriter why an adjustment is warranted. Okay? So now we've got 4 things that we put together so far. We've got the contract, the multiple offers, the upgrade list, the update list. Last thing is comps. I would always bring comps with me to my inspection. I think the right number of comps is somewhere between 3 and 10. 3, because you'll never see an appraisal with less than 3 comps, okay? And if you're that agent that gives me 1 comp, what I've learned over time that means is you can't find any other comps that support your contract price and we're in trouble, okay? So 3 is the number, 3 is the, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to know, like, if you're representing the buyer, how many times does the listing agent show up?
Let me answer this first by saying, in my company, we never just use a lockbox key. I have an assistant who, for me personally, always calls to set my appointments and always gives the listing agent the opportunity to be there. If it's vacant on lockbox, I would say 50% of the time the agent just says, go use your lockbox key. It's less common that I meet a buyer's agent. It's mostly the listing agent that meets me, but every so often it's the buyer's agent, and when they come, they're usually really well prepared. And that's impressive to me, because I know that normally falls onto the listing agent, but here's a buyer's agent who's caring about their client and wants to make sure I'm considering good data. I find that to be incredibly professional.
It amazes me how many times the listing agent doesn't.
Yeah, it happens a lot. Look, I know you guys make good commissions on these deals closing. To me, it's 20 minutes out of your way. It's not a big deal. And again, that's why you're hired, is to be their eyes and ears. Did you have something?
Yeah, so when we've done classes in the past with appraisers and stuff, they'd always told us like a 3-mile radius, but like you're saying, it's geographical. If they're in a subdivision, you stay in the subdivision. And we were always told to go just 300 to 400 feet, the house square footage below, and 300 to 400 square feet above for comps within a parameter. Like they always had like this window of up or down.
Yeah, so, okay, give me a minute to talk, because I will talk to you about how I run comps. And then if I'm not answering your question, let's get back to that, okay? So 3 to 10. 10 is kind of arbitrary. At some point, I'm going to lose interest, or you're going to overwhelm me with data. So I wouldn't include more than 10. I would probably include at least 1 pending or listing, because most appraisals you see nowadays will have at least 1 pending or listing. I would focus on the lower price listings. I can find my own overpriced listings. The lower price listings are more concerning. If we're an escort $400,000 and there's a model match listed at $385,000, that's concerning to me. Why is mine worth $400,000 when I can go buy this one for $385,000? So I think the format that I like the best is give me the 1-page plano. Okay. I also think if there's something about that house that you want to tell me, I would put it like in the top right corner. I would write notes, okay? You might not have something to tell me on every single comp you give me, but maybe you were in a comp and green carpet, smokers, divorce, backs power lines, kitchen smells like tuna, whatever the case may be, maybe there's something you know about the house that I'm not going to be able to find in my own due diligence that's really helpful to me. I would also get out of the habit of only including comps that support your value, because what you might miss is that house next door that sold yesterday for $20,000 less. And when that scenario exists, you have 2 choices. You could either ignore that comp and hope that I miss it. I'm not going to miss it. Or you can include that comp and tell me why it's not as nice as our house. Okay? I'd rather you get in that habit of giving me all the data and giving me your feedback on it. So somewhere between 3 and 10. Now I'm going to tell you how I run comps because I think it's how you should run comps. I am a huge believer in location's the most important thing in almost every case. So what you'll find as I talk about my process, it starts in location and then it works out from there. And I slowly go from location to caring more about the house later. But my first searches are very locationally specific. Actives, pendings, closed sales in my subdivision within the last year. Okay? I would prefer not to use a sale that's 10 months old, but if the only sale I have in my subdivision is 10 months old, I might use it. Because if location is the most important thing, and in that scenario, I'm going to have to go to this subdivision and this subdivision and this subdivision. If I don't have a frame of reference here first, it makes it really hard to know if this subdivision and this subdivision and this subdivision are truly similar. Because I can adjust for time. Do you guys know that? The market's going up 0.5% a month, and here's today, and I'm using a comp that's 9 months old, went under contract 10 months ago. I can make adjustments for the appreciation that occurred between the meeting of the mines date, which is the contract date, and today. So I can account for the time, but if I don't have a frame of reference in my immediate neighborhood, it's really hard for me to account for differences in location. Okay? A couple more notes on that. If you're in a meets and bounds area, you can't do that, right? Sometimes you can do book and map, but it's harder. If you're in a huge master plan community like McDowell Mountain Ranch or something like that, I recommend, if you do that, actives pending solds within the last year, McDowell Mountain Ranch, you can get 400 properties. Okay? So narrow it down to my builder, my phase. Okay? Let's get really micro. I want to know my builder, my phase, because I'm never leaving McDowell Mountain Ranch, but when I go to this phase and this phase and this builder, I've got a frame of reference in my builder. Because some builders sell for more than other builders in certain neighborhoods. Sometimes they built a higher end product in that neighborhood. So that's my first search. My second search, here's what it doesn't include. Putting a pin on the subject property and going a mile radius in all directions. Because it's not how buyers work. Buyers look at a map and say, I want to be here, I want to be about here. It's not a mile radius thing. And so that's why, remember that question I asked the appraisers? I would ask the appraisers, is what geographical boundaries are you going to use to select your comps? That's why it's so important. Because I go to the map, and if I'm at 59th Street and Paradise Lane, my boundaries might be Bell to 64th Street to Greenway to 56th Street, or maybe to Tatum, maybe down to Thunderbird or down to Acoma. And then after I draw my boundaries, I start narrowing in on house-related issues. You said plus or minus 300 or 400 square feet. I think it's plus or minus 15 to 20% square footage. And sometimes I'll go higher, sometimes I'll go lower.
20%?
Yeah, 15 to 20%.
Okay.
Yeah, if we're 2,000 square feet, maybe I'm going plus 300 square feet or more. I go out at properties with bigger bits of data because if the county says it's 2,000 square feet and I measure it at 2150, I give myself a little more room than that, just in case. But I think 15% is a good starting point. I'll put in a lot size parameter. I start with pretty wide parameters, and then when I narrow it down, I lower it. Like if I'm a 7,500 square foot lot, I want to make sure I'm not using half-acre comps. But I might go as high as 12,000 square feet, maybe 15,000 square feet. I just don't want to miss the pie-shaped lot in my immediate track home area. Okay? what else would I put in there? Maybe a year built parameter. That's a little harder for me to narrow down because on a house that was built in 1940, my parameters would be different than in a house that was built in 2015. So it's hard for me to do that. But so that's my next search. So that's kind of a combination of location and size. And improvements are both considered in there. So any other search I do after that is really specific to my house. And so what I would say you should do is if you're standing in the living room of this house and you're looking around, maybe rate like what are the top 5 most important things about the house. Number 1, let's say, is location. Number 2, let's say, square footage. But what else is important about that house? Does it have a basement? If it does, I'm going to do basement searches. Okay? Is it on a golf course or on a lake? I'm going to do a search for houses on the golf course or on a lake. Is it remodeled? Is it a brand new fix and flip? I'm going to go and try and find other fix and flip remodeled comps. Do we back a busy street or do we back power lines? I'm going to do other searches to try and find some houses that back busy streets or back power lines. Because those are harder, unique aspects about the house. As an appraiser, I want to try and find some comps that bracket those aspects. If I have an owned solar system, maybe I'll do a search for owned solar comps. Okay? Gather up all that data, narrow it down to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 comps, and that's the package you give to the appraiser. Okay? Any questions on that? Because I think that's a good way, working from location out from there. And look, when I'm doing basement comps, I want to be clear on this. I might put my parameters in on that other example, Greenway to Bell, 64th to 56th Street. But then when I put basement as a criteria, if I'm only getting 1 or 2 comps, I'm going to expand those searches. Maybe I go north to the canal that goes like this, and go to Tatum, and go down to Thunderbird, because now I really want to make sure I have other houses that have basements. It's okay to do that. In terms of how, thanks for all your insight today. Appreciate you coming in.
Your time was awesome.
Thank you.
Great nuggets to take back.
Great. What else? What else can I tell you on that? Do you have any questions on how I run comps? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Again, I think that if you start in that subdivision, it'll force you to have your eyes wide open and not miss anything. Yeah, go ahead.
Does the down payment, not down payment, I apologize.
Seller concessions?
Closing costs, yes.
Good question.
Seller concessions.
So, if the subject has seller concessions, that has no impact on the appraisal. There's no way for me to translate to that appraisal. But here's where it's going to sound unfair to you. If the subject is selling with $3,000 in seller paid closing costs, and comp 1 is selling with $3,000 in seller paid closing costs, most good appraisers will make a minus $3,000 adjustment to that comp. Because we don't care, we shouldn't care about the subject contract. We don't adjust the subject, but we do adjust the comps. And if that $3,000 in seller concessions has impacted that sales price, then we're supposed to adjust for it. Not all appraisers do adjust, but when I talk to agents and I say, if you're presenting an offer of $400,000 and it has the sellers paying $5,000 in closing costs, is that impactful to your seller? Answer is generally yes, right? Affects their bottom line. It sometimes leads to them pushing the sales price up to cover those costs so they can net what they want to net. And if it impacts the sales price, it's the appraiser's job to adjust for it on the appraisal. Okay? Sounds unfair though, right?
I've always kind of ran it like that and seen it that way. Like, of course, you're always going to see them offset when it comes in really weird. When it's that normally like 3,000 off, you'll see that offset.
Yep.
So I've always kind of seen it like that.
Yeah, completely.
We do have one scenario right now where with our buyer right now, we went through, got them in with the appraisal. It came in lower, about $6,000 off, because there's an outside laundry room. So it's not livable space. You actually have to step out of the Arcadia door and go right to the laundry room, but it is attached. So listing agent was upset. She called our lender and she's trying to get everything reversed out. How would you see that?
So question for you. Are you saying that either the county or the listing agent included that laundry room in the square footage?
Correct.
So the actual size of the house is smaller than the way it was marketed?
Correct.
Yeah. So that makes sense to me. Because a buyer is buying it based on 1 square footage, and when you hear it's 150 square feet smaller, that might be impactful. If it is not accessible from the main house, a lot of appraisers won't include it in the square footage. So that makes sense to me. And that's a scenario where I'd be like, yeah, all else being equal, if the appraiser did a good job, like that's one where I'd be like, yeah, I get that. The agent maybe unintentionally misrepresented the house.
Yeah.
And so I follow that. For sure.
So then the agent's going to dispute it. Is that pretty?
Well, they can dispute it, but that's not one that win.
Okay.
When you dispute an appraisal, you want to either find mistakes on the appraisal or you want to like give them your insight that maybe the appraiser missed. This is a scenario where the appraiser made the observation and has decided this is how I'm going to handle it. And he's justified to handle it that way. So yeah, I don't, unless there's other things wrong with the appraisal, I don't think they'll win. And you represent the buyer, right? I'd be like, right on. Yeah. That's fair, if the buyer wants to still pay more, but the buyer should know what the right square footage is. And so that would be a scenario where I'd probably support the appraiser if he's right on. Any other questions for me? You guys have been such a nice group.
So are there dollar amounts that you associate with things like when you're going through and you're meeting with a seller and you're going through and the seller wants the moon, are there if there are power lines behind them, for example?
All right, I totally know where this is going because I get this question all the time. So here's the bad news.
The alleyway.
The bad news is I don't have a chart.
Mm-hmm.
I see the disappointment in your
Yes, it
eyes.
is
I've seen that from women
We
many
just want a
times. I
chart.
totally get it. The reality is, okay, so the first appraisal I ever did 30 years ago for a guy named Ken Boswell was in McCormick Ranch. Just graduated college, and I'm excited. This is my first appraisal. I can't wait. And we're writing up the report. And the subject had a pool, and Comp 1 didn't have a pool. And he goes, $10,000. And so what that meant to me was that a pool was worth $10,000 today, tomorrow, forever, here, there, everywhere. And appraising was super easy for me for like 6 months. I remember going home to my girlfriend, who eventually became my wife, and saying, there were 10 appraisers in the shop. And after the first month, I was the #2 producing appraiser. I'm like, this appraising is so easy. I don't understand why everyone's having trouble with it. And then, true story, 6 months into the business, and I'm just cranking out pool $10,000, pool $10,000. A guy named Bud McBride, who is still appraising today, walked into my office, and this was before technology, and he handed me an appraisal. And he's like, hey, I heard you're going to be in this neighborhood later today, and I was just there, and I want to help you. Here's a copy of my appraisal, which was super cool because he was the #1 producer. I was gunning for him. And a few things happened in that instant that kind of freaked me out. One, it was the first time I realized he had 3 fingers, which is totally irrelevant to the story, except for the fact that it's a little startling, So the first thing is like, oh my God, he has 3 fingers, which is totally fine if you have 3 fingers. I don't think less of you. But then I turned to page 2, already a little freaked out, and I looked at the pool line, and he made a $12,000 pool adjustment. To me, that was wrong. Like, really wrong, because I was told it was $10,000. What's Bud doing with the $12,000 adjustment? So I waited. Such a dork. I started hyperventilating. And then I waited not only till he left my office, I waited until he left the building and went to the parking lot. And then I ran into my boss's office and I closed the door. I'm like, you got a rogue appraiser on your hands. Because you told me pools were worth $10,000. What's Bud doing? He's going nuts. And the look in his eyes when he realized that I didn't understand one of the core basic principles of appraising. All those adjustments that you see when you look at an appraisal shouldn't ever be based on a chart, because what they're supposed to mean is what would a typical buyer in this market pay for the amenity. And the reality is the exact same pool in Lower Buckeye is not worth the same if that exact same pool was in Paradise Valley. So that's the long-winded answer to your question as to why I don't have a chart. And if you were to just call me up and say, Jay, what's a pool worth? I'm going to give you some lame answer, like somewhere between $0 and $100,000. And I have scenarios where I've made both of those adjustments before. But here's the good news. You all have my card now. I think if you don't, let me know. I'll give you one of these. If you call me up and say, Jay, I'm taking a listing in Kierland, what do you think a pool's worth? And I'll say what price range, and we can have a conversation.
Well, and it also depends on, was that pool built in the 50s? Because a rectangle in the 50s and a rectangle today,
Different. Totally agree.
really
with you.
different.
Totally
And
agree with you.
they could be right next door to each other.
Yep, a kidney bean pool with a diving board
Right.
and plaster and,
And is
the
it-
crappy tile around the top is.
Is it a wading pool? Because
Yep.
a lot of people are just building those crappy wading pools.
Yeah.
I agree, but unfortunately, there are some appraisers who think a pool is a pool. You either have one or you don't,
Right.
and it's 15,000 or it's nothing, and that's the end of that. I agree.
Sometimes
There's
people
degrees.
don't want a pool, so it's an adverse.
Yeah, so like in age-restricted communities, a 30-year-old pool in Sun City legitimately might not have value because they've got community pools and they had a pool, been there, done that. They don't swim anymore. So there are scenarios where pools don't really add any value. So that's my flippant answer. But
Okay, no, that's
again, sometimes a fifth bedroom has value in certain neighborhoods and sometimes it doesn't. And the good appraisers really understand the nuances of that neighborhood. That's the other reason you want a geographically competent appraiser. Because if you have an appraiser who doesn't know Paradise Valley, they know East Mesa, and the subject has a 4-car garage and comp 1 has a 3-car garage, and they're making $3,000 adjustments because that's what he makes in East Mesa, when it should be $15,000, like that's another way lack of geographical competency rears its ugly head. Yeah, what were you going to say?
I was just thinking.
Okay, we can come back to
I
you.
lost.
You had one?
So is there anything that we need to know when it comes to FHA conventional appraisals?
FHA versus conventional versus VA?
Yes, and then also how long does it stick to the property?
So that's more of a lending question, and I'm not positive. I don't think VAs and conventionals stick. FHAs do, it might be like 90 days, but I would suggest that you talk to a lender about that. And so you should care about that. For me, my value should be the same any one of those scenarios. FHA, VA, conventional, and I am a VA appraiser. I'm currently the only VA appraiser under 98 years old. Not true, but it seems that way. So my value shouldn't change. Every so often, I might require an additional repair on an FHA. There's a couple extra things we need to look at, but otherwise my value should be the same. And most of the time, if I'm going to condition for something that it needs to be repaired, it's health and safety. If I think there's an adverse health and safety issue or something that impacts the livability of the house, those are times when I would call for repairs. And I would probably call for those FHA, VA, or conventional. And then, did you have another one? Or was that it? Did I get it? Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
And then what are some common call outs with appraisal stuff that we should be aware of so our sellers are prepared or buyers?
Well, so again, it's always up to the appraiser, almost always up to the appraiser's discretion. Like there's some appraisers, if there's no smoke detectors, they'll say that's adverse health and safety issues. There's easy things that you can do. If if somebody just painted a house and they've taken the electrical outlets plates off, put them back. Because I would call for that. If they're exposed wires, I'm going to call for that to be a repair. And that stinks because that costs you 80 cents to put one on there and $100 to pay me to come back. Again, otherwise, it's just, I don't have good insight for you. Empty pools are problematic. Most appraisers would say that's adverse health and safety where somebody could fall into the pool. And sometimes those are really expensive to repair, so I don't have a good answer on that. But when in doubt, repair it ahead of time and save your person the money. I'd recommend. Here's one for you, and then we're just about done. I'll stay if you have any more questions. Before I'll call it a bedroom, what does it need?
Closet? It doesn't, that's not a law anymore.
There's no law, so that's okay.
So
Well,
wait,
that
no.
just went
So-
away though, there was.
So like in my third bedroom, I took the closet off. I
Okay.
use it for bookshelves.
So I want to. I should preface this question by saying there's no universally accepted definition of a bedroom, and I know this because I had to speak as an expert witness on bedrooms, and there's different criteria. Different entities have different criteria. So what I'm telling you is these are my criteria before I'll call it a bedroom. So you said closet. I agree with you. For me, before I'll call something a bedroom, it either needs a closet or some permanently affixed furniture that can be used to store clothes. My litmus test is what's the highest and best use of that room.
So when I go to sell my house, I need to put
I put the closet back or
The doors back on.
or put the doors back, yeah, and hang a bar.
As soon as the doors are on.
I would do that because 2-bedroom
But-
versus
But
3.
there was just a few years ago, there was something that came out and they said that's no longer,
That wasn't an appraisal. That wasn't I don't know what that is. If you call Air MLS today and say, does a room need a closet to be called a bedroom, they'll tell you no. But that's not my criteria. Like, I'm the one signing the report, and there's no uniform definition. I wish we had a
so even
uniform
if you had a
definition.
12 by 12 room with a window in it, you wouldn't call it a bedroom.
Probably not. Not unless it had a closet or permanently affixed furniture on there. There's more things that first of all, and I don't know what the size is, but it has to be large enough to sufficiently hold a bed
Right.
and you be able to walk around probably on 3 sides, I would say.
Right.
I don't know what those dimensions are. 2 forms of ingress and egress, which is not the same necessarily as a door and a window. That's what we traditionally see as a door and a window. But I have a room in my house, we call it the Xbox room. It has a closet and 2 doors, one on each side. It's 2 forms of ingress and egress. And every so often, if you're doing a lot of transactions, you might have an appraiser require security bars to be removed from a bedroom window. If they're permanently affixed security bars, that's not considered an ingress egress point. One other thing, before I will call it a bedroom, I need there to be functional access to take a shower or a bathroom, and I want to explain that. I'm going to give you 2 scenarios, and hopefully it'll make sense. 2-story tract home, living room, dining room, kitchen, room with a closet, a door, and a window next to a half bathroom. That's the first floor. Upstairs, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. I probably am not going to call that a bedroom because you have to walk upstairs to take a shower or bathroom. I'll give you 3 scenarios. Another scenario, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms on this side of the house, an addition on this side with a closet and a window, but you have to walk through the kitchen and the living room to take a bath. I probably am not going to call that a bedroom because it's not super functional to be like naked walking through kitchens, like to take a shower. Last scenario that I would give you, $5 million house in Paradise Valley, master bedroom, master bath on this side, 4 bedrooms on this side, each with their own en-suites.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where you access the bathroom from the bedroom, and then another room with a closet and a window next to a half bathroom. I wouldn't call that a bedroom because in order to take a shower or bathroom, you'd have to walk through somebody else's bedroom. I don't view that to be functional access to take a shower or bath. I'm not saying those need to be your criteria. I'm just telling you, if you're looking at one of my appraisals and it doesn't have those aspects, I'm probably not going to call it a bedroom. All right? We good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
braving the coronavirus.
So I have a question,
Yeah.
a personal.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for coming. I love my home cooking place. Seems like a great place.
So how much would you charge to pre-list this? It's like 3 casitas, a single family home, the same size as the other 2 casitas.
Wait, so it's a duplex and a single family.
But it could be called, this is what the commercial broker called it, and this is what
This guy called it a house with a guest house?
3 Casitas sits on a quiet.
So here's a question for you. Are these all individually metered? It's important. So it's important because,
I got it right there.
yeah, you want to check and see if they're individually metered. Because that kind of impacts the highest and best use. The other thing is I would want to know how the county categorizes it. This is a hard one because I don't know if an appraiser is going to do it as a house with a guest house or as a triplex.
Or 3 casitas, because the
Well, so that would be a
single-family
triplex.
homes is the same size as the casitas. It's
Yeah.
an investment property, that's why a commercial broker
How big's
had
the
it
house?
second.
The house is 2,000 square feet?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I think you probably looking at like 650 for this one. This is a hard appraisal because again, the appraiser first has to determine what he's appraising. You know, normally, okay, I'm coming to appraise a house, but in this one, some appraisers might appraise it as a house with a guest house duplex, and some might appraise it as a triplex. And the difference is, what are they looking for comps? Some might look for triplex and fourplex and duplex comps. Some might look for house and guest house comps, and I'm just not sure what they would do because this is a really unique one. So I don't have a good answer for you,
okay.
probably without seeing it. But one of the things, if you want to talk again, one of the things that I would ask is for electric and if there's gas, are they metered together or separately?
Okay,
More likely to be appraised as like a duplex, triplex, or fourplex if they're metered separately. Because otherwise, the homeowner has
so
to
you would charge less if they were all
No,
together?
I mean, either way, the good news is if I'm appraising it for a private party, I can use the same form either way, so I'm not sure.